Well, hey there, my friends. I was just getting sat down in my nice hammock here by my pond and my garden as kind of a ambiance for making a video about God. G-O-D, God. What are those letters? What does that word bring to mind? Funny enough, after I started making this video, I got about a minute and a half into it, and my dog bit my cat's head. She's a puppy, so she's just playing around. But the cat just kind of swats at her, and it distracted me. And I thought, I sat down to make a video. Finally, the sirens went away, the other sounds, all the noise from the neighbor's house, and then all of a sudden the dogs start barking. The dog starts attacking to the cat. This is Lucy and Callie. They love each other. They do. Callie's pretty tolerant. Lucy likes to jump in the pond. But I thought that would be I'll just probably leave that in, There's a certain... The reason being is because God spelled backwards is dog. I thought that was kind of funny. But anyway, I ended up spending a minute and a half dicking around anyway here. What is God? What's my point? If you are religious, if you have a particular belief, if you go to church, then you already have an idea of what you think God is. And you have a belief that God is, well, depending on what belief system you hold, you may believe that God is either a personal God or a universal God or the all, is what I've... But I'll get into that. If you are atheist, you instantly, when you clicked on this video, your intent was probably to dispel any myths that a God exists. Now, don't deny it. Don't pretend it's not true. I know atheists, and I know that their intention is not to try to understand others' version of what God is, or even to try to understand God, but rather to dispute God, and that's fine. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just making that point. In the middle are agnostics, which is just kind of a term that's thrown around and I feel is a little bit shallow in a sense. That kind of a, show me it and I'll believe it. If you're agnostic and you remain agnostic, it means that your whole life you'll just be in ambivalence. You'll have a cognitive dissonance about wanting to believe that there's something greater, but also saying, well, I have to be proven. And what that means to me, personally, is you'll never believe anything unless it's absolutely for certain. And I can't even believe things that are absolutely certain that I've never seen. Things that I experienced through the television or through the radio, like, for example, another country. Give me an example of the fact that Egypt is a real country. Of course it's a real place. People live in Egypt. There's people on social media posting from Egypt. Nobody has ever disputed Egypt exists. But therefore I have to believe that it's real because most likely it is real. That's what you might call a... Ooh, the neighbor's cherry tree is loaded. Sorry, I got distracted. Oh, I love cherries. That's what you might call the Occam's razor. That's O-C-C-A-M, Occam. And Occam's razor just says that basically the most likely scenario is probably true. And when it comes to a lot of things, like whether people exist, whether places exist, most likely it's true. Although it's becoming harder with the internet and deep fakes and, computer-generated images, things like that. But let's just be right down to earth. When you see a tree, it's most likely that tree exists, right? And therefore, when you have a feeling or an idea, it's much more difficult to determine whether that idea is a real thing or whether that feeling is legitimate. That's even harder to explain. I didn't realize that this would be... See, I didn't take any notes for this. I just sat down and said I want to talk about God for a minute. And the reason being is because I don't talk about it often enough. And I say it, not he or she. Because when I say God, some people think he. And I do not. I do not believe in a male-female, differential between God and, men and women are two sides of the same coin, if you will. And so to sum it up simply to start, God to me means no. 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 My dog's chewing things up, and I'm not starting this video over again. God equals understanding. God equals understanding of a system or a self or... Damn it. How do I explain this? No! Bad dog. She's being a bad dog. Anyway, I'll just let her chase her around, I guess, because the cat knows how to escape and the dog doesn't. Let me back up for a minute. There's an old saying, which we all know, most of us have heard, judge not lest ye be judged yourself. Now, a person might think, well, you've judged, and I have judged people. But it's not a preconceived notion or a judgment based on what they look like, what the color of their skin is. It's completely different than judging a person based on what they've done. You are going to judge people, especially when they're bad people. In other words, I have no problem being judged on my values or failures, because I know that when somebody calls me out on something, it's either complete bullshit or it's right. And I guess what it comes down to is how tied up am I in what other people believe in me. And for the most part, absolutely not at all, unless it's my family. So therefore, maybe my family is my God. Maybe God to me is the connection I have with my loved ones. And I'm just proposing ideas here because I'm coming to a conclusion. There's a big difference between... I'm going to give you my experience of the first time I saw God or met God. Now, I am a psychonaut, or at least I was in the past. It's been a couple of years since I've taken psychedelics, but back in the day it was a regular thing. And we had a high reverence. I was fortunate that after the first couple times I took LSD, I found a book called The Psychedelic Experience by Timothy Leary and Ralph Metzner, I believe. I think it was Ralph Metzner. And it was based on the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and they'd taken that and morphed it into something to help you through an LSD experience. And not a lot of people in my age group, 16, 17, had read things like that. So I was like trying to get my friends to read it, saying, look, it talks about these things called set and setting. And that was 30 years ago, and way back then I was a dumbass. I was a kid. I was running around the neighborhood with my friends, skateboarding and building ramps, and then all of a sudden we discovered this amazing substance that allowed me to see something I'd never seen. So I don't want to go into psychedelics here, but I'm going to say one night we went to Portland, we picked up this acid called Smiley's. We got 6 hits of it, my friend Ben and I, and we took 3 each, and it was very strong. The guy told us it was strong. It ended up being intense. He said it was 300 micrograms. I don't know the true potency of it, but let's just say that everything was breathing. It was a crazy night. We had a great time. Around 4 a.m, we decided let's walk down to the train bridge, train trestle, down the street, and watch the sunrise. So we did, and it was what they call a, I can't remember the name of it, but it has... Get out of my stuff, dog. It has the 2 really large metal trestles, I guess is what they are. I'm not sure, but then they have all these cross members made of steel. The whole thing's made of steel, and we used to go down and shake the cross members, and they go whoom, 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 like kind of shake the bridge. And anyhow, there were 2 ladders right in the middle of the bridge. It met, and there was one pillar that went down into the Willamette River. And people used to hang down there and spray paint on the metal, and they'd hang out, and there was like a little thing on the concrete where people would have bonfires and stuff. But the cops would come and harass us. But anyhow, we went down there. There was a ladder going up onto each trestle, and they were only about 1.5 feet wide. And it was young and dumb. I was tripping balls, and I climbed up onto the top of this thing, and the ladder ends, so I just kind of shimmied up to the top, and I sat there. And the sun was just coming up. And as the sun rose, I watched the whole thing just stared at it as much as I could, you know. I didn't want to blind myself. But I watched the sun slowly rise over the horizon. And once it got to the top, I just had tears running down my cheeks. Not because I was blind, but that I was just so emotional. And I turned to see my friend, and he was gone. He had walked like a half mile around the bridge and all the way down, and he was yelling at me from the shore, hey bro. And actually I remember him saying, hey fried guy. But just an amazing experience, and I called it my rebirth. And that was a moment where I can draw on, a moment where I had an epiphany, an awakening, a complete rebirth into this world, and a new discovery of what is and what I am and what God means to me. And that's not to say that psychedelics are going to show you God, but it wasn't the first or I should say it wasn't the last time that happened to me on high doses of psychedelics. And the reason I compare that is because, say, I've heard discussions with, Buddhist leaders and whatnot saying, well, could psychedelic experiences mimic the awakening or the epiphanies that people have in church or religious breakthroughs? And there's a debate in there. People say, well, no, it's not the same thing. But when you look under an MRI during people tripping / having a mystical experience or in deep transcendental meditation, the same part of the brain is triggered. It's called the God center of the brain. I mean, that's what they nickname it. And this definitely is not to say everyone should try psychedelics, but I have to bring this in when I talk about God, because some of the experiences I've had have made me realize that everything is interconnected and that we are part of God. And that gets misinterpreted as being that we are gods and we are greater than everything else. The thing is, no. If we are part of God, then we are God. And if we are God, we're no greater than anyone else. In other words, it's thinking that you're a god is not something that makes you dominate others. If it's done properly, it makes you respect others more than you would if you thought that you're just a flesh and being and on a random rock floating in space. And that's not to say that atheism is wrong. To me, when I was younger, I basically considered myself more or less an agnostic, because that's the only term I heard to define myself. But I also have always said, no, there's no way in hell that any of these religions are right. That there's no way that God could be what they say it is. And I said, if I'm ever going to believe in a higher power, I'm not going to do it because I'm desperate or I'm sick or I'm in pain. I'm going to do it because I convince myself in my own somewhat scientific-minded brain that God has to exist because of X or Y, which is kind of, in a way, how I feel. I have no reason to prove anything to anyone else, meaning that I'm content with what I believe. And no, I don't believe in dying and going to a judgment like others believe. I don't believe that, any of these belief systems are complete. But it doesn't mean that I have to. I guess the only problem I have is the evangelists versus psychonauts, for example. Everybody I've ever had a psychedelic experience with, for the most part, have had great breakthroughs that have made them think that each person is worthy, that they want to help others and do good things for others. And then you look at the extreme end of televangelism or evangelists in churches where they're just asking for people's money so they can build more churches, so they can have more money and fly more jets, and people believe it. So if you're willing to believe a guy on TV with the suit telling you to send him your money, maybe it's worth trusting in a psychedelic compound that's been around for millions of years, probably long before humans. I only say that because DMT, dimethyltryptamine, which a form of DMT is what's in psychedelic mushrooms, are out also, and in LSD, the ergot fungus. These have been around for a long time, but they also mimic serotonin in the human brain. But serotonin has been around longer than humans. It's found in the plant kingdom, meaning that in plants and animals, serotonin and dopamine morphed into what they needed to be. And these are important aspects because these brain chemicals are what give you your understanding of what you think to be reality, God, those types of things. So it's all open to interpretation, right? And I have a pretty good tolerance, and I use tolerance sparingly, because tolerance means that you think that something is not right, but you put up with it. And that's how I feel about religion. I tolerate religion because I know that it can cause damage, and I know that it can also cause good. In other words, I don't think that religion should disappear. If you asked me 10 years ago, I would have a totally different opinion on that. And today I believe that religion just needs to be adjusted. And a lot of Christians, for example, believe pretty rational, they believe that maybe Jesus is within, and I don't necessarily believe, let's say, the Bible, but I believe this and that could be better ways to live rather than being commands or, The 10 Commandments, as George Carlin said, can be summed up in like 3. I don't even remember what they are. Don't be a dick, don't steal, and don't kill anybody. I think is pretty much what it is. All the little sins that we believe that we're committing, things that we're told are wrong, I think that can hold us back, because guilt is a killer. I'm not kidding. Guilt causes stress, right? Stress is known to be a major killer. So don't let yourself be guilty about things that you don't need to be guilty about when we already have enough guilt going on. Real legitimate guilt about things that maybe we wish we would have done, and I think minimizing that guilt means minimizing sin, if you will. Guilt is sin, right? So stop doing stupid shit. Be a good person. Be nice to people. It's pretty simple. There are some real assholes out there that make me just want to leave the human race sometimes. Don't let them discourage you. We all have bad moments, but there are some really bad people out there. And I don't really know how to deal with that. And I bring that up because in the past, I think the way they dealt with it was say it's just the devil. Right when I said that, my dog squatted down to take a dump in the yard. Sorry to tell you that, but it's just funny. When I said the devil, she takes a dump. Nice, Lucy. I've never believed in Satan or the devil. What I believed in is bad humans and bad human nature. And that's usually learned or through negative childhood trauma. So let me give you why I believe. If people say that the devil causes people to do horrible things, all I'd say is now you can look at statistically and see that most people who abuse others have been abused themselves. So no, it's not just a devil getting into their mind. It's actually caused by other humans. It's caused by the devil within our society and within our species. And we're minimizing being bad people. We're minimizing bad people by saying it's just the devil, is my opinion. And throwing them in prison or executing them in front of the public, is that a solution? I don't know. I don't know how to deal with the bad people in our society. But let's just say for the good people, the people who are kind to one another, and that's really all that's required to be a good person as far as I'm concerned. Don't fuck with others. Don't harass others. If you want to consume substances, whatever it may be. But we live in a very complicated world right now, and people want help. They want hope. They want to believe that there's something greater than them. They want to believe that there's a God, and people always have felt that way. The more difficult times are, the more people want to believe in a God and that there's a higher power. The only replacement for that is money. And that's, I believe, what's happened to our society today. And that's why one thing I can agree with the religious extremists is that money takes over and it becomes the new devil, in a way. Absolutely true. People think they can buy happiness. And this takes me back to God equals understanding. And understanding equals happiness. God is not a replacement for money. God is not a replacement for food. God is a belief in a greater energy or a greater power is only something that helps you understand. It's how people understand the world around them. Every time I make a video like this and I'm looking around in my yard, I see all the leaves on the trees, and while I'm talking, I have these background, I don't know how that happens, but I have these background thoughts about the leaves and how they're intertwined with the other plants, and just how amazing it really is. And then I think, for people who live in the city in an apartment in the middle of a really hardcore urban area, they have no connection to that nature. Thank God they have places like Central Park in New York where people can go and get away, but still, bonding with nature is one of the most crucial things. And I say that because it's two things that cause people to become, to look for God. It's either a lack of nature or a lack of connection with nature, or a fear of nature. In other words, back in the day, it's not that people wanted to go camping to get away from the city. It was that people really wish they had a city to get away from the wildlife. The lions, tigers, animals eating their livestock, People for so long wanted protection. They had these huge storms that would wipe out their crops and their land, and they didn't know who to blame or how the earth worked, and they just said it must be God. But we carried that into the 21st century, and it's not something that I'm saying people who are religious are idiots. 10 years ago, I would have said that, and I was kind of a jerk about it, I'll admit. I've come a long way from throwing Bibles out of motel windows in Seattle at Bumbershoot, or, reading Revelation when I was tripping at 20 years old, or it's like 16 years old when I read Revelation for the first time, because I wanted to know, what are these prophecies? And now, when talking with so many religious people over the years, I realized they talk about Revelation but haven't even actually read it themselves. It's amazing how few people even read their own religious Bibles, their texts. So, anyhow, that's about all I got for now, and I just wanted to bring up this complicated and deep subject and talk lightly on it. Not meaning to insult anybody who has a belief system or anybody who thinks that there's a personal God, but rather not to dismiss you, but to connect with you, and hopefully connect you with other people who, if atheists and semi-believers can connect on these things, I mean semi-believers, I mean people who believe that there may be a higher power, but don't necessarily carry the dogma. Because if you carry the dogma with you, if you believe that everything is bad and everybody's out to get you, and there's a damaging world out there, that's basically, if you believe that everyone is crooked and everyone is corrupt, it's only going to cause you problems, regardless of what you think happens afterwards, if that makes sense. So, thanks for coming along on this ride. There's at least 2 more sets of sirens during this video. I'll talk to you later.